Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every law, local, national, international, has vanished. No police, no courts. No courts, no governments. Every legal code deleted. Every rule erased. What do you think happens next? People celebrating their freedom, building a new kind of paradise. No. Within hours, the world plunges into madness. Civilization doesn't gradually decay, it instantly implodes. This isn't fiction. This is what could really happen if laws disappeared overnight, and it's much worse than you think. Let's begin on the day the laws disappeared and witness the first horrifying 24 hours of a planet without order. Laws are invisible until they're gone. They're the quiet structure behind every action you take: buying groceries, crossing a street, locking your door at night. Most people never think about the legal systems that shape their reality, but the moment they're erased, society doesn't lose a guideline, it loses its spine. In this hypothetical world, we aren't easing into chaos, we're diving headfirst. The very concept of accountability evaporates. There are no consequences for anything. Steal? Fine. Murder? Who's going to stop you? There are no laws, no enforcers, no punishment. This isn't freedom, it's a vacuum. And in that vacuum, human nature mutates. Governments disband overnight, either because leaders flee or are assassinated. Banks are emptied within minutes. Prisons open their gates, not as an act of mercy, but because the guards have abandoned their posts. The news doesn't report the collapse, it disappears along with it. The internet dies. The power grid falters. Cell towers go dark. Because every system you've ever depended on was built on legal obligation. Without law, there is no duty, no maintenance, no cooperation. Some optimists might imagine humans banding together, small communities forming to protect each other. Maybe that happens for a few hours. But the reality, in most places, predators rise first. The strong take what they want. The scared hide. And anyone trying to do the right thing quickly learns that ethics are now a death sentence. This isn't an apocalypse with zombies, aliens, or supervillains. This is an apocalypse made entirely of us. Every fear you've ever buried about what people are truly capable of becomes real. And once the collapse begins, there's no reset button. No cavalry, no law waiting to return. In this video, we'll journey through this lawless world, from the initial collapse, to the emergence of violence, to the destruction of infrastructure, and beyond. Into a future that looks nothing like civilization and everything like our worst evolutionary memories. It happens in a moment. No warning, no explanation. 1 second, the world is governed by thousands of years of law, and the next, nothing. Governments are stripped of their authority. Police abandon their posts. Military units receive no further orders. Judges, lawmakers, presidents, and premiers become ordinary civilians with no more legal power than a stranger on the street. And the world reacts fast. In the first hour, confusion reigns. People open their phones, check the news, scroll through social media, and see the same thing repeated. There are no laws anymore. At first, many think it's a hoax or a weird internet stunt. But as news anchors walk off set, as public officials vanish from sight, the reality starts to sink in. By hour 2, the economy implodes. The stock market doesn't crash, it ceases to function. With no enforcement, there's no reason to honor debts, contracts, or obligations. Banks are stormed not by criminals, but by terrified citizens demanding their money. But there's no law requiring banks to stay open. Most are already shuttered, and some are burning. By hour 3, mass looting begins. Supermarkets, pharmacies, electronics stores, all emptied. The first wave is cautious. People run in, grab what they can, and flee. But the second wave is bolder. Crowds form, fights break out. No one is arrested. No one is stopped. By the end of the first day, hospitals are overrun or abandoned. Without laws protecting staff or ensuring funding, most healthcare workers leave, many of them trying to protect their own families. Traffic lights stop working. Fires burn unattended. The sound of gunshots becomes background noise in cities once known for quiet nights. Entire cities descend into chaos. Streets flood with people, some searching for supplies, others looking to dominate. Organized crime flourishes instantly, taking over key intersections, repurposing old gang networks into miniature warlords. In wealthier suburbs, neighbors turn on one another, forming barricades, loading firearms, and watching the horizon for signs of invasion. And in rural areas, it's even worse. With no backup and no infrastructure, many communities become isolated survival zones, overrun by whoever claims them first. The most chilling part of all this isn't the violence, it's the speed. Society doesn't fall over a week or a month. It doesn't even take a full day. Within 12 hours, the illusion of structure is shattered. Not because people wanted freedom, but because in the absence of rules, fear and power take over. By nightfall, cities glow with uncontrolled fire. Roads are jammed with abandoned cars, and millions of people sleep with weapons under their pillows, if they sleep at all. This isn't a temporary disruption. It's a permanent unraveling. Once the laws are gone, they're not coming back. There's no one left to write new legislation, no system to enforce it, no trust to rebuild it. Every bond that held the world together, social, legal, institutional, has been broken. Day zero isn't just the collapse of governance. It's the end of belief in order itself. And now that the old world is gone, a new one begins to take its place. One shaped not by cooperation, but by raw, unchecked violence. With no laws left to restrain human behavior, violence doesn't just increase, it becomes the default form of power. In the vacuum left behind by the collapse of civilization, those who can inflict harm become the new ruling class. And the moment people realize that no one is coming to stop them, everything changes. Predation becomes policy. In the absence of laws, there are no rights, only what you can defend and what you can take. Property becomes meaningless unless you can hold it by force. Families are displaced from their homes, not because of natural disaster or war, but because a stronger group decided to claim their house, their food, or their lives. And the disturbing truth: many do it without hesitation. Some out of desperation, others out of opportunism. But the scariest ones are those who always wanted to hurt people and now finally have the chance. The only currency left is power through fear. Weaponry becomes the new economy. Guns, knives, blunt objects, anything that can kill or intimidate becomes as valuable as gold once was. In a matter of hours, black markets reconfigure into violence markets. Those with access to weapons rise fast. Former criminals, gang leaders, rogue soldiers, and even civilians with military-grade gear begin carving the world into zones of control. Former cities turn into fragmented kill zones. One street belongs to a group of ex-police officers who formed a brutal militia. The next is ruled by a gang that was once minor, now armed to the teeth, and enforcing its own twisted version of justice. In between, no man's lands where corpses rot in the open sun, and anyone who crosses is assumed to be a threat. Justice becomes personal and violent. Someone steals your food. You chase them down and beat them, or worse, someone insults you. That's a fight to the death. There are no mediators, no appeals, no courts. Even revenge becomes instant, public, and theatrical. A way to send a message: we are the strong. Don't cross us. And yet, even among all this horror, some people try to organize. Makeshift camps and survival groups form, often led by ex-military survivalists or idealists hoping to protect a handful of people from the chaos. But the reality is grim. Unless they're heavily armed and constantly vigilant, these pockets of peace are quickly overrun. You don't get to be moral in a world where violence wins every time. In this world, children are taught to fight before they can read. Mercy becomes a weakness. Compassion becomes a liability. If you can't protect your resources, your family, your body, someone else will take them. Trade still happens, but it's now dangerous. If you want clean water, you might have to cross through territory controlled by killers. Want antibiotics? Prepare to offer something valuable: ammo, fuel, or even human lives. The rise of predation turns every interaction into a gamble, every journey into a potential last one. And what happens to the people who can't fight? The elderly, the disabled, the sick, the unarmed. They are either protected by someone stronger, or they are consumed by the system. Because in this new society, survival isn't a right. It's a privilege won through blood. What we're witnessing is not just a breakdown of peace. It's a reversion to a prehistoric state of being, one where dominance equals survival. And morality is nothing but a memory from a dead world. But it's not just the people who collapse into anarchy. The very systems that once kept civilization alive are failing fast. In the next section, we'll see what happens when infrastructure, power, water, transportation disintegrates completely. If society is the body, then infrastructure is the nervous system. And in a lawless world, that system dies instantly. No one is legally obligated to keep anything running. No one can be forced to show up to work. And without laws to enforce cooperation, the most critical services, electricity, water, transportation, and communication, grind to a halt almost immediately. Let's start with power. Most people assume their electricity comes from a faceless, unbreakable system. But it's actually a fragile web of engineers, maintenance crews, technicians, and software, all working in legal synchrony. Once the laws are gone, power plant operators abandon their posts. There are no repercussions for staying home. No one can force them to keep the lights on when their own homes are under threat. As a result, the grid collapses, either through human neglect or cascading mechanical failure. Hospitals go dark, refrigerators stop, communication towers fall silent. Even emergency generators eventually fail as fuel distribution evaporates. Cities once vibrant with light descend into total darkness at night, making them even more dangerous as criminals and predators thrive under cover. Then, the water stops flowing. Water systems, especially in urban areas, require constant treatment, monitoring, and pumping. Without trained personnel to manage filtration, water quickly becomes unsafe. In many places, pressure drops altogether. Toilets stop flushing, faucets run dry, and as sanitation systems fail, waste backs up into the streets. Disease spreads, parasites thrive. And the once invisible miracle of modern plumbing becomes humanity's latest downfall. Transportation also dies a sudden death. Commercial flights are grounded permanently, not by war, but by the absence of law. There's no air traffic control, no flight plans, no regulation. Major highways become dead zones, jammed with abandoned cars, looted trucks, and hastily constructed barricades. Public transit ceases. Train networks rust in place. Ports are raided. Ships drift or sink. Even bicycles become high-value targets for theft. Meanwhile, communication disappears. With no internet maintenance, no broadcast regulations, and no operational staff at network hubs, the world goes silent. News agencies vanish. Social media ceases to function. Radios fall silent. Satellites drift with no one managing them. The information age ends not with a bang, but with total, untraceable silence. You can't even call for help because no one is listening and no one is coming. Food is the final nail. In the first days, food is looted from stores. But by the second week, perishables rot, frozen goods spoil, and even canned food begins to disappear. There's no farming left, no laws to protect landowners, no guarantees of payment, no logistics to move supplies. Agricultural workers abandon the fields or are killed for their produce. Supply chains disintegrate. Distribution centers are stripped bare. Starvation begins. In cities, this leads to desperation. In rural areas, it leads to raids. Even if you're armed and have your own stash, someone will come for it eventually. And when they do, they won't be asking nicely. Medical care? Non-existent. Pharmacies are empty. Hospitals are deserted or occupied by gangs. There is no legal protection for medical professionals and no legal consequences for attacking them. Life-saving medication is hoarded, stolen, or bartered at gunpoint. Pregnancies, injuries, infections, everything becomes potentially fatal. The collapse of infrastructure doesn't just make survival harder, it makes civilization impossible. The systems we built over thousands of years vanish in days, and with them, the illusion that we could ever survive without them. It becomes clear just how deeply society depended on compliance, duty, and legal enforcement to function. And when those disappear, so does everything else. Now that survival has become a daily battle and infrastructure has crumbled, the next question arises: what kind of humans emerge from this chaos? In the next section, we dive into the terrifying evolution of human psychology in a world without rules. When law disappears, so too does morality. At least, that's how it begins. In a world where survival depends on the ability to dominate or escape, ethics rapidly become obsolete. Kindness, patience, fairness, these are luxuries now. And those who cling to them don't survive long. In this world, the old rules of civilization are worse than useless. They're dangerous. Imagine you come across someone asking for help, starving, injured, desperate. In the old world, helping them would be the right thing to do. But in this world, it might be a trap, a distraction while others flank you, a decoy, or even someone willing to kill you just to take your food after you show your compassion. The ruthless thrive. They adapt quickly to the new reality. They move in groups, they arm themselves. And they adopt a code that's terrifying in its simplicity. Take what you can, kill when you must, never show weakness. These are the new rules. They aren't written on paper, but on blood, and they are enforced without mercy. The moral compass shatters. Parents begin training their children not in language or literature, but in survival, teaching them to hide, to shoot, to strike first. In this world, childhood ends before it begins. There is no time for innocence. The brutal new environment turns people into predators or prey. There is no in-between. Psychologically, the shift is rapid. Fear, once an occasional visitor, becomes a permanent resident in the human mind. Trust becomes the rarest resource on Earth. Even family ties begin to erode under pressure. How long can a parent go without food before considering the unthinkable? How long can a brother protect a sister when she becomes a bargaining chip for a local warlord? People don't just do horrible things to survive. Over time, they start to believe those things are normal. The mind adapts to trauma by reframing it. Murder becomes self-defense. Theft becomes survival. Betrayal becomes strategy. Within weeks, entire populations stop seeing the world through the lens of right and wrong. The new reality is ruled by instinct, raw, animalistic, and violent. Groups form temporary alliances of convenience. But loyalty is conditional, and betrayal is frequent. Food, weapons, territory, even human lives are traded. Some people become commodities. Others become monsters. The human soul, once protected by social contracts and justice systems, is now stripped bare. Cannibalism resurfaces, not as a shock tactic, but as a rational choice when the food is gone. Torture becomes common as a means to extract information, loyalty, or confession. Execution becomes spectacle, often used by warlords and raiders to instill fear and assert dominance. People no longer ask, "Is this right?" They ask, "Will this keep me alive?" And yet, in this psychological wasteland, some try to hold on to humanity. Scattered among the chaos, a few isolated groups cling to old values. sharing what little they have, burying their dead with dignity, refusing to kill unless absolutely necessary. But these pockets are shrinking, because while decency still exists, it rarely wins in a lawless world. Even memory becomes a form of suffering. People start to forget what peace felt like, what a calm night sounded like, what it meant to go a day without killing or running. Trauma reshapes them. And over time, they don't just act like beasts. They start to believe they always were. This isn't dystopia anymore. It's devolution. A regression to the darkest state of human nature, where violence isn't the exception, it's the only rule. But where violence dominates, power soon organizes. In the next section, we'll explore how warlords and tribal leaders rise from the rubble to create their own brutal empires. Surviving the physical dangers of a lawless world is only half the battle. The deeper, longer war plays out inside the human mind. In the absence of order, justice, and structure, the human psyche begins to fracture, slowly at first, then all at once. Post-traumatic stress becomes the norm, not the exception. For many, it starts on day zero, the moment society collapses. But as the days turn into weeks and the violence becomes constant, trauma stops being an isolated event and becomes a permanent state of consciousness. People live in hypervigilance, unable to relax, sleep, or feel safe for even a second. Paranoia is not a disorder here. It's a survival mechanism. The results are devastating. Memory begins to deteriorate. Emotions flatten. People stop laughing, stop crying. Even grief becomes dulled because mourning requires time and safety. Luxuries no one has anymore. Relationships are strained to the breaking point. Lovers become enemies. Parents turn cold. Siblings go silent. Human connection itself begins to rot, replaced by a dull, instinctive need to preserve the self above all. And then comes the numbness. It's not just fear anymore, it's detachment. A psychological shutdown. To kill becomes mechanical. To watch others suffer becomes routine. The part of the mind that once said this is wrong gets buried under endless justifications. It's what I had to do. They would have done the same to me. That's just how the world works now. Some people break completely. Hallucinations, psychosis, and suicidal ideation surge. With no medical systems or mental health services left, those suffering from psychological collapse have nowhere to turn, and are often eliminated by others who see them as a liability. Mercy is dangerous. Stability is rare. The mentally fragile are abandoned, isolated, or worse, used as tools by warlords or violent groups who prey on broken minds. Children suffer the most. Their brains are still forming, still absorbing everything. And in this new world, what they absorb is pure horror. They don't grow up with schools, stories, or support. They grow up with screams, starvation, and survival. Their identities are shaped by brutality. Their emotions trained toward numbness. The very idea of empathy is foreign to them. They are the first generation raised in true, unfiltered anarchy, and their psychology reflects it. Meanwhile, the spiritual collapse is just as profound. In the old world, people turned to religion, philosophy, or community in times of crisis. But in a world without laws, those institutions vanish. Churches are raided. Temples are burned. Philosophical ideals sound like jokes. People stop believing in justice, in goodness, even in higher powers. Why would a god allow this? Why would a moral universe reward such cruelty? The collapse of law becomes the collapse of meaning itself. Yet, ironically, some do find meaning in violence, in domination, or in survivalist ideology. Cult-like groups emerge, preaching twisted doctrines that justify the bloodshed. Some believe they are chosen. Others believe the apocalypse is divine punishment. But all of them share one thing in common. They fill the vacuum left by law with something far more dangerous: irrational certainty. The longer this continues, the more irreversible it becomes. Minds adapt to horror. People forget the way things used to be. Law, kindness, fairness. These become myths. Stories told around fires by those old enough to remember. For everyone else, this is simply the way the world is. The greatest tragedy isn't just that the laws are gone, it's that eventually, no one misses them. The idea of peace becomes alien. The mind reshapes itself to survive in the darkness, and in doing so, forgets the light ever existed. But even in the dark, a new kind of order begins to emerge. One not built on justice or democracy, but on fear, dominance, and control. Up next, the rise of warlords and tribalism in a fractured post-law world. In the void left by vanished governments and collapsed institutions, something new and terrifying rises: raw power. Personified by warlords, gangs, and tribal factions that rule through violence and fear. While traditional authority has crumbled, humans still crave structure, even if it's built on blood. And so, the strongest seize control, not to restore order, but to enforce dominance. These new rulers aren't elected. They don't lead with ideals or vision. They rise because they are the most ruthless, the best armed, the least restrained. Their authority is absolute, and it is enforced by guns, blades, and brutality. Warlords emerge quickly, especially in densely populated areas. Many are former gang leaders, corrupt ex-military, or even ordinary civilians who realized early on that control over violence meant control over people. They seize neighborhoods, towns, or entire city blocks, fortifying them with stolen weapons, scavenged supplies, and human shields. Their first act: establish territory, often by massacring those who resist. Tribalism follows close behind. As central identity dissolves, people revert to smaller, primal units, bloodlines, ethnic groups, former gangs, or even local communities bound by survival. These groups form not out of ideology, but necessity. Alone, you die. Together, you might live. But allegiance comes at a price: total obedience to a leader and brutal punishment for betrayal. In these proto-states, everything is militarized. Children are conscripted as fighters. Civilians are used as currency, traded, bartered, or enslaved. Women often become high-value property, forced into marriages or exploited for leverage. The idea of human rights is not debated. It simply doesn't exist anymore. Some warlords attempt to create order, but it's the order of a prison camp. Curfews are enforced with executions. Stealing food means death. Speaking out means public punishment. These systems function not on cooperation, but on absolute, unrelenting terror. And oddly, they begin to work, at least in the most dystopian sense of the word. These war zones start to stabilize under iron-fisted rule. Trade networks re-emerge, but only within and between warlord territories. Caravans guarded by armed men move goods like antibiotics, fuel, and weapons from zone to zone. But these trades are fragile. Ambushes are constant. Deals are broken. The only real guarantee is that violence is always on the table. Even primitive forms of governance return: kangaroo courts, public rituals, and enforcement squads. Warlords offer protection, but it's a protection racket. You give them everything, and in return, they don't kill you. It's less government and more medieval feudalism reimagined for a modern apocalypse. And what happens to those who resist? They are crushed. Resistance movements, idealists, ex-lawyers, retired officials occasionally rise with visions of rebuilding the old world. But they rarely last. Without laws to protect them, they are easy prey. Those who don't die become warnings. Bodies hung from buildings, left to rot as messages. There is no law here but mine. Over time, a horrifying new political map forms. One of fiefdoms, fractured zones, and tribal kingdoms. Maps drawn not with borders, but with blood. And in the rare places where two warlords clash, the resulting battles are cataclysmic. Entire communities razed to the ground in the name of dominance. Still, many people welcome the structure, no matter how brutal. After weeks or months of chaos, even tyrannical rule can feel like stability. It's easier to obey a violent king than to face the unknown every night. And so, humanity begins to rebuild, not civilization, but a mockery of it, altogether by control and fear rather than law and trust. The tragedy is profound, from democratic societies, constitutional protections, and civil rights, to a world where the strong rule the weak, and the only justice is the sword. All in the span of months. And yet, even this brutal new world is unsustainable. With no innovation, no education, and no cooperation, society doesn't just stagnate, it regresses. In the final section, we explore what happens when humanity permanently slips back into a prehistoric state of survival. At first, it looks like humanity is simply adapting to a new, brutal way of life. But over time, it becomes clear. This isn't adaptation, it's devolution. Without law, without learning, and without systems of trust, humanity doesn't just stop progressing. It begins to forget everything it once was. Science halts. Innovation vanishes. There are no universities, no laboratories, no schools. The knowledge of generations, medicine, engineering, astronomy, agriculture, sits idle in books and hard drives that no one can access, understand, or care about. The internet is dead. Libraries have been burned or are buried in ruins. There is no one left teaching, only surviving. Language itself begins to degrade. In isolated tribes and fragmented groups, dialects fracture. Literacy declines. Eventually, even communication becomes localized and primitive. Concepts like democracy, justice, or ethics begin to sound like ancient mythology. Abstract and irrelevant in a world where the only concern is the next meal or the next threat. Art disappears, not because people lose creativity, but because creativity requires safety, and safety no longer exists. No one composes symphonies, paints murals, or writes novels when they're starving, hunted, or grieving. The human soul, once driven to express, is now chained to survival. And survival leaves no room for dreaming. Religions splinter. Ancient texts are lost or warped beyond recognition. Some tribes invent entirely new belief systems based on the warlords who rule them, or the catastrophes they've endured. Superstition replaces structured theology. Logic gives way to fear-based rituals. Knowledge of the past becomes oral legend at best, dangerous heresy at worst. Technology decays, machines rust, batteries die, circuits corrode. Even things as basic as running water or basic farming tools become impossible to replicate. There are no factories, no supply chains, no experts left. Humanity becomes dependent on salvage, looting the relics of a world it no longer remembers how to build. Urban landscapes turn into decaying jungles of steel and concrete. Skyscrapers collapse, not from bombs, but from time and neglect. Roads are reclaimed by weeds. Wildlife returns to cities. Once proud capitals of civilization become eerie graveyards, inhabited only by scavengers and ghosts. Generational memory breaks. Children grow up never knowing what electricity was. Teenagers learn how to fight, but not how to read. Adults struggle to describe a world they only dimly recall. Within a few generations, humanity forgets it ever flew in the skies, mapped the stars, or connected through invisible waves of information. It is not just a collapse of society, it is a reset, a return to primal existence. The planet becomes a patchwork of hunter-gatherer communities, fortified villages, and tribal war zones. Fire becomes sacred again. Spears return to prominence. The wheel remains, but barely. Trade reverts to barter. And fear becomes the dominant cultural force. Some humans still dream of a better world. Elders pass down stories of what used to be, Cities that glowed at night, devices that spoke to the sky, laws that protected the weak. But to most, these are fairy tales. Stories told to children before sleep, not because they are real, but because they're the only hope left in a hopeless world. Civilization, in all its complexity, is delicate. It was never guaranteed. And when the thread of law was cut, it didn't unravel slowly. It exploded. What remained was not chaos. It was the true face of humanity, stripped bare, regressed to its earliest form. No more progress, no more future. Just survival in a world where no one remembers why laws ever existed in the first place. And now, having walked through the ruins of a lawless world, only one question remains. If this happened, would you survive it? In the end, this thought experiment reveals something chilling. Laws aren't just rules. They're the scaffolding of civilization. Without them, the collapse isn't gradual. It's instant, absolute, irreversible. A lawless world is not a utopia of freedom or expression. It's not an escape from government control or a romantic return to nature. It's a descent into brutality, where the only right is might. Where violence becomes culture, and where humanity forgets itself in the haze of blood, fear, and survival. Everything we take for granted, safety, electricity, education, medicine, trust, depends on a system of mutual obligation. That obligation is meaningless without law. And once that system vanishes, so does everything we've built on top of it. We like to believe that humans are inherently good. That cooperation will prevail. But the truth is, civilization isn't natural. It's taught, enforced, and protected by law. Remove that protection, and what's left is not freedom. It's a predator's paradise, and most of us wouldn't last a week. So ask yourself, if tomorrow all laws vanished, would you survive? And if you did, would you still be human by the end? If this scenario gave you chills, you're not alone. These kinds of what-if worlds help us understand just how fragile our reality really is. So if you want to explore more terrifying or thought-provoking alternate timelines, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment with your own theories, and let's keep pushing the boundaries of imagination. Because sometimes the scariest what-if is the one that's only one bad day away from becoming real.